I'm Steve Freeman. Welcome back to the Steve Freeman Podcast. Today is kind of off the cuff. Tomorrow is the 4th of July here in the United States, meaning it's our Independence Day. And it got me thinking, many of you know I have very strong opinions on being independent in the music business. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about some of the pros. We're going to talk about some of the cons. But as you well know, if you've followed this podcast for any amount of time, I end every show with a saying, and it ends with, there's nothing wrong with being independent. After 25 years in the music business, I've come to learn that that's where I feel most at home, is being independent and not being controlled or being told what to do and what not to do, and having the complete creative control and the freedom over my career. We're going to talk about that since tomorrow's the 4th of July in today's podcast. Before we get into it, guys, please subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or iHeartRadio or Google Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe to the podcast so that every episode is automatically uploaded to your playlist every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, do me a favor, give us that coveted 5-star review. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, well, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's real easy to do. Hit that subscription button, but make sure that you hit the bell icon next to it so that you're notified every time I upload new content. And more of you are following me on social media, and I'm loving it, and I'm trying to follow all of you back. You can follow me on social media at The Steve Freeman everywhere. Another thing you guys are doing, which is really cool, is signing up for my weekly newsletter, The Revolution. It's absolutely free. You can sign up at thestevefreeman.com or thestevefreemanpodcast.com. And if you do so, in the month of July, I'm giving away 2 free one-on-one sessions to members and subscribers of The Revolution. So if you want to get in on your chance to possibly win one of those one-on-one sessions, sign up for The Revolution. I'm giving away 2 of them this month. Okay, guys, let's jump into it. What does it mean to be independent? There are a lot of different people over, the years who have had many different definitions of what it means to be independent. For me, at its heart and soul, independence means not being controlled by somebody else, not having another third party or another person determine your outcome. It puts you in the driver's seat. Some of you have heard me say it in videos and podcasts in the past. I live under a banner and a mantra that says, if it is to be, it's up to me, meaning that I'm the one responsible. I don't associate myself or put myself in a situation where I have to answer to other people. When I get up every morning and I look in that mirror, the guy in the mirror is the one I have to answer to. Now, that comes with a large set of responsibilities. It's not always hard to do. It is definitely the less traveled path. It's hard. It's hard being independent. And I know that I preach this to you guys a lot, but I also want you to understand and know that I do sympathize with you. Although I believe strongly in being independent, it is a hard road. It's an uphill climb. It's a constant uphill climb. But I also know that having worked with artists that are signed to major labels, it's just as much of a climb for them. Not only is it a personal climb that they get up and face the exact same challenges that you face every day, now they've also got an additional challenge that they have an entire team that's supposed to be working for them that they have to stay on and make sure that they're doing their job for that artist. That's a full-time job in and of itself. There are pros and cons of being an independent artist or an independent songwriter and not having that major label affiliation or major publishing affiliation. A lot of misconceptions exist out there thinking that, if you have a major label deal, then everything's going to go your way. Everything's going to go great. If you have a major publishing deal, I'm going to get tons of cuts because I'm signed to a major publisher. When in all honesty, the that's just not fact. It's just not the truth. More artists at major labels get shelved than get releases. I mean, if you really look out over it and you think of the landscape of country music, there are 25 relative artists. There are just about that, maybe 30, let's say 20 to 30 legitimate, relevant artists in the format. But there may be on any one record label 30 artists just on that label. But there's just not enough political capital to go around at that label for all of those artists to be successful. So some of them get shelved. There is a certain hierarchy at a record label. The more successful or established that an artist is, they always come first. So if you're a new artist, you're at the bottom of the pile. You're at the bottom of the relevance stack and the priority stack. That's what's always appealed to me about being independent, is that I'm in control. I am as relevant and I'm as much of a priority as I make myself. Like I said, it means that you have to do a lot of work on your own. You have to educate yourself. You have to know exactly what it is that you're doing. Now, let me say this too. When I talk about being independent, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a team around you of very well educated and informed and savvy people. You do need a team. It's kind of funny. The music business is a team sport and it isn't a team sport. It's always a team sport when things are in process of being done, but when the credit starts going around, it's often a solo sport. But such is life, such is this business. So when I talk about being independent, I'm not saying, hey, you guy, girl, band, artist, songwriter, this is all on you. You have to do all of this 100% yourself, because that seems daunting. And I understand that just as much as anybody. I fight it every day. I've been a part of the major label system and the major publishing system. It was good for a couple of years until I really looked behind the curtain and saw what was going on and realized that you had to play the politics game, which those of you that know me well, I don't play politics very well. And I got to a point where I realized that if I wanted me and my music to be a priority, I needed somebody to go, we're going to make you our priority. And as I looked around, this is such a selfish business that I was the only one willing to make that commitment to me. It's not that other people didn't want to do things for me. It's not that they didn't want to pitch my songs, but there was always somebody one rung up on the ladder. There was always that person they may have gone to college with, or that person they go out drinking on Thursday nights with, or this guy that gave them seats to a Titans game. There's always that one thing, that one inevitable thing that somehow seems to keep people one rung on the ladder right above you. So I decided to hop off the ladder. That's not to say that I've achieved the things that I've achieved.
I'm not sure about that.
Sorry, Siri. That's not to say that I have achieved all of the things that I've achieved 100% by myself. There are people in this business that I trust that are on my team. Now, I'll be honest with you, at times it does feel like it's all me all the time. And that's a frustrating thing. And that's something that you never really truly get past, because the path of an independent is most of the time a lonely path. But I try to surround myself with people that I trust, with people that I know, and with people that I feel when we're working on something together that we all share a common goal and we all have that goal's best interest at heart. So when I talk about being independent, guys, I'm not asking you to isolate yourself on an island and figure it all out yourself. I mean, the reason that I have an artist development company is strictly for that reason, for unsigned and independent artists to have a resource where they can go to be able to learn and release their music and market their music as if they had a record label, but they're in control. They own all of the content. They own all of their own masters. That's why I do that, because it is important to have a team. It is important to have a goal. It is important to have a strategy. And it is impossible for you, the artist, the creative, to put as much as you do into the creative process and into the creation to then hold yourself accountable to be responsible for the marketing of it, the promotions of it, the strategy of it. It's impossible for you to do it all on your own. So it's very important that even though you may consider yourself an independent, whether you put yourself there on purpose or whether you didn't have a choice, and if you're going to do this, then you've got to forge your own way and it was almost kind of forced on you. It's important that you have a team around you of people that have your best interest at heart. Now, you are always the leader of that team. As an independent, the reason to be independent is so that you don't have other people telling what you have to do and what you can't do. You have to be the leader. There is power in being independent. After all, the new music business model today, since record labels don't do artist development anymore, they don't sign an artist and then put 2 or 3 years of work into the development process to get that artist ready for the mainstream or ready to launch. They can't afford to do that anymore. So their new model is to look around and sign successful independent artists that are having a certain level of success on their own. And the major labels look down, they see those artists, they go, okay, for a little bit of money, we can fuel that fire. That's the new music business model. I tell artists all the time, it's one of the most asked questions I get. How do I get signed to a record label? How do I get signed to a major label deal? The fastest track to that is be a successful independent artist. Have something they want. Create demand for yourself and your career and the art that you're creating. Same thing goes with you songwriters out there listening. Everybody asks, how do I get a cut? How do I get a cut on a major artist? The easiest way to get a cut on a major artist is to have already had cuts that were hits. If you want a publishing deal, the easiest way to get a publishing deal is get a big cut. And listen, I know all of that is hard to do. It's it's harder now than it has ever been because the revenue in the music business is shrinking and there's not the millions and millions and millions of dollars going around. That not only does our industry keep perpetuating this thought by the lifestyles that the artists live and things like that they still are. Believe me, they're not. The labels aren't making the money that they used to make. So if you want those things, the easiest way to get there is to be a success on your own. Create demand for you as an artist or you as a songwriter or you as a producer or you as an engineer. And sometimes that takes a lot of time. Sometimes it takes years. I think I said it in a video before, but it was 12 years into doing this professionally, writing songs and producing records before I had my first number one. 12 years. It's a long time. I mean, I've got a 12-year-old daughter. I think from the time she was born until now, that's how long it took. There's a lot of life in 12 years. So, yes, being independent is the hard road. It is definitely uphill. But for me, it's the only way to go. And I know for a lot of you, based on some of the conversations I've had with you, the comments in the comments section on the YouTube videos, most of you guys, my audience, have a heart for being independent. And that's what I love about you guys, is because I feel like you're my community. And there is strength in numbers. Yes, we can all be individual, but being independent also doesn't have to mean individual. It can mean a collective, a group of independents. And if we could ever get to the point where we realize that when one independent sees another independent, we should see that person as an ally and not a competitor. Guys, there is strength in numbers. I would like to see a more we community over a me community. And I think I'm starting to see it a little bit. I'm starting to see people come together to create alliances. We've talked about this in the past, about creating a circle. Just because you're independent doesn't mean that you shouldn't be creating a circle and involving yourself and other people in this circle so that a group of independents can rise and succeed together. There's nothing wrong with that. But the other side of this is the artist that just can't see being independent and wants that major label deal. Be careful what you're chasing. I'm constantly amazed at the lack of education and information and knowledge that most artists have, because 90%, and it's probably more than that, but I'm going to be conservative. 90% of most of the artists that I run into and see, when they think major label, they see themselves having the career of a Carrie Underwood, or they see themselves having the career of an Ariana Grande or Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber or Ed Sheeran. None of you guys ever see yourself as the 300,000 artists signed to major record labels that you've never heard of. And having self-confidence is a great thing. But the numbers are not in your favor. And you have to be careful, because you got to think about it this way. The independent route may not seem as shiny to you, because it's not. But is the reward worth the price that you're going to pay to sign a major label deal or to sign with a major publisher? I'm going to tell you something in a second that's probably going to shock you. But let's take a look at the record label situation. Signing with a record label is basically the exact same thing as taking out a very high interest loan or credit card. These record labels aren't paying for all of this stuff for you to just have. You have to pay it all back. You owe every penny to that record label that they spend. Now, their first order and point of recoupment is your sales or your publishing. In 360 deals, it can be your touring, your merch, endorsement deals, all of that. But you have to have all of those things. You have to actually sell records. You have to actually book shows and sell merch and get endorsements for any of that money to ever start coming off of your red balance. For anybody involved, you or the record label, to make money. And that's a difficult process. I was talking with a very successful artist last year. And when I say successful, one of the most successful artists on the face of the planet. And he was just telling me how he just recently broke even with his record label. And this guy's been having hits since 1999. He just broke even with his record label 19 years after signing his deal. Now, that's not to say that this guy doesn't have a good life, have a great life. He has a ton of number one hits. He sells out concerts every time he plays. He's on tour every year. He's one of the biggest in the business. It's not saying that he doesn't have a great life or a successful life. But up until last year, he still owed his record label money. Just something to think about. On the publishing side of things, I get this question a lot about, every songwriter wants a publishing deal. Well, I want you to think about this. Even major publishers, if you're a new writer that has never had a hit before or any kind of placements in TV or film, if you're a new writer that has never earned any revenue from any song that you've ever written, the deal that you're going to get is going to pay you between $18,000 and $22,000 a year. And in exchange for that $18,000 to $22,000 a year, that publishing company is going to take 100% of your publishing. Now, at that point, how bad do you want it? I mean, yes, being a part and having that banner of writing for a major publisher, it may feel good to you. And see, that's one of the things and a lot of the pitfalls that people in the music business fall for. You think it means something to everybody else, and it doesn't. The only thing it helps is you're going to get better co-writes. That's great. But you're sitting there making $18,000 to $22,000 a year, which is basically minimum wage, maybe a little bit better than minimum wage. And they're going to make you write 2 times a day, 5 days a week for basically nothing. And they're going to take all the publishing. You actually have a better shot of having waiting tables or doing something and making more money and putting all of your passion into your songwriting, creating relationships and getting the right relationships to help you, than you are signing with that major publisher. Not only that, you sign that deal, you're one of 250, 300 writers that write for that publishing company. So not only now do you have all of the competition that's out there in the business as a whole, but now you've got to fight 249 immediate people in your own camp. You have to beat all of those people before it gets out into the rest of the world. It's a daunting task. It never ceases to amaze me the number of people that I talk to that think the music business is easy. They think that it's simple as 1, 2, 3. Write it, record it, and sell it. But there's so much more that goes into it than that. Independence Day. There's something special about people that have an independent spirit, an independent mind, and an independent way in which they approach their business, their life, and their philosophy and their outlook on the world. The music business is no different. And like I said before, is it the road less traveled? It absolutely is. The mountains on the road of independence are a little bit taller and a little bit higher than the mountains you're going to face and the hills you're going to face on the main road. But I have to say, after 25 years, some of the best decisions I've ever made in my career and my life were to step away from the major label system, to step away from the major publishing system, and really go it on my own and wear the banner of being independent proudly. One of the things that I find is that it starts to draw more like-minded people to me. I find myself working more with people that think the way that I think. I find myself producing records for people who appreciate the process as much as I do and care a lot about the product. They care a lot about the music. They don't just care about getting it out and trying to make money. Whoever it is that you are on the inside, if you take that and what's on the inside and you live it outwardly, those are the kind of people that you're going to attract. At least that's been my experience anyway. Now, I'll say it again. It's not always fun. It's not always easy. Matter of fact, it's hardly ever easy. And even though I've made some bad decisions and wrong choices, and I've involved myself with some of the wrong people, I'm dealing with the fallout of dealing with an asshole and the complete wrong person that came along at the wrong time right now. It's been going on for 5 years. I've made mistakes. I've gotten into bed with the wrong people. I've done business with the wrong people who didn't have the same goal that I have or the same passion. We might have been traveling in the same direction, but we were certainly on parallel paths. We were not on the same path. And that's what I want for all of you. I want you to know your road. I want you to feel comfortable with it. I want you to be able to close your eyes and let go of the wheel and feel confident about who you are and where you're going. For me, I find that wrapped in being independent and approaching things from a standpoint that as long as I satisfy this thing that's inside me, everything's going to be okay. And that's what I want for all of you. So happy Independence Day. Guys, thank you for joining for another episode of the Steve Freeman Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Really more off the cuff today. But this is a special time of year for me, and I think summer, working and producing some of the projects that I'm working on right now with new and emerging independent artists, it just really fuels the fire in me to want to light and stoke that independent fire in you. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, I wish you would. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, you can subscribe, and it adds the podcast to your playlist, and it shows up automatically every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you're watching the video version on YouTube, hit that subscription button, hit the bell next to it, so that you're notified every time I upload new content. And follow me on social media at the Steve Freeman. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm more active on Instagram than anywhere, so make sure you follow me on Instagram. We also have a new Facebook page just for the Steve Freeman Podcast with a private group. So if you'd like to join our group and follow the page, a lot of conversation goes on. We'd love to have you. You can just search the Steve Freeman Podcast on Facebook and like the page. Guys, as always, keep being creative. Keep pressing the boundaries. And what? There's nothing wrong with being independent. See you in the next one.